Hello, this is Dr. Gomez from the University of Texas Health at San Antonio. And today we're going to talk about radiology residency from medical school to interviews. This is a conference for medical students that are applying for residency program, in particular radiology. This is my opinions. I've been a residency program director for many years in 3 different institutions and have interviewed thousands of people. And I've given this conference to medical students in my institution. First thing we need to do is relax. It's easier for me to say, but when I still remember when I was a medical student and I was applying for residency program, how tense I was, felt like an unknown world. I didn't know what to do, who to talk to. So the reality is that statistically, you have a very, very, very high chance of matching in the residency of your choice, and an even higher chance to just matching in the specialty of your choice. So people say statistics don't lie, and they don't. I think you have to do the right things. You need to relax. You already done the hard work throughout medical school, and now it's time to put it all together and market yourself. So first of all, I want to talk what is radiology. So radiology is a big specialty. Most of the people think of radiology as diagnostic radiology, which is the use of imaging of the body to make diagnosis. But there's also interventional radiology, which uses images to make treatment and also diagnosis by way of biopsies. Within diagnostic radiology, there is also nuclear medicine, which can be a residency program or a fellowship. Also within diagnostic radiology, there are many fellowships. Pediatrics, musculoskeletal radiology, neuro, chest, body imaging, breast, women's imaging, that you could do as a subspecialty. Radiation oncology, although in some institutions is part of the Department of Radiological Sciences, usually is a completely different department in other places. And radiological physics, which is part of every radiology department, even though as a physician you don't get to interact as much with these folks, they're a very important part of radiology. So when you're a medical student and you say, okay, I think I like radiology, what are your options if you want to get into the world of radiology? The most common one is diagnostic radiology with a separate internship. This means that you apply for an advanced position in radiology and you are responsible for securing an ACGME accredited internship. This internship could be surgery, internal medicine, pediatrics. There are many other options listed in the website of the American Board of Radiology. And after you successfully finish an internship, then you would do your diagnostic radiology training, and it starts as a PGY2. There are some programs in the United States that are categorical, meaning that they will offer an integrated internship in your training. These categorical diagnostic radiology programs are usually very popular among the international medical graduates due to visa status. Just briefly explain about the Holman pathway. This is a pathway within diagnostic radiology that is research-oriented and is sponsored by the ABR and the ACR. It comes with or without PhD. Some institutions have attached a PhD track to the Holman pathway, but it doesn't need to have a PhD. It only means that the American Board of Radiology will grant you eligibility to take the board even when you're spending some of the time in diagnostic radiology doing research. And that has to be submitted by the institution and the resident, and it needs to be approved. And there's also, you can do interventional radiology. Now there is 3 ways you can do interventional radiology. There is the integrated IR residency, which is just like any other residency. It's on residency, and right now it's kind of highly competitive because there are not too many spots. Also, there is the ESIR, which is an option within the diagnostic radiology residence to switch into IR. So some folks come into diagnostic radiology, and when they rotate through interventional radiology the first or second year, they realize that that would be the subspecialty of their choice, and they apply for the ESIR. Take in consideration that just because you're in diagnostic radiology does not assure you will get into the ESIR track, because it most likely will require a separate but much smaller admission process. You don't know how many people in your class are going to be interested in this. But it's a way to do an IR. And there is the IR Residency, which is a 2-year program that you do after you finish your diagnostic radiology resident, and it's meant to replace the traditional fellowship. Now, the difference between these 3 options is the time. Integrated IR Residency is done in 5 years. You are eligible to take the Board of Radiology and CAQ of Interventional Radiology. ESIR takes 6 years, and the IR Residence takes 7 years. They all lead to the same conclusion, but it's just how much time will take you to do it. And some programs will offer a nuclear medicine 2-year residency. A lot of people, when their applicants ask me, does it help if I start as an MS1 to work in radiology? And my answer is perhaps, but not likely. I say perhaps because maybe if you start very early as an MS1, you may get to know more people in radiology, you may get to know more mentors, perhaps you may get to do more research as related to radiology. But in all honesty, all your energy during your first and second year of medical school should be concentrated in trying to get good grades and achieving good USMLE scores. I think the first 2 years are a good time to learn very well basic sciences, and your application should reflect that you work really hard those first 2 years. And the best way to show that is to getting good grades. And I think that you can do other stuff related to radiology as long as you understand that the most important thing is to apply yourself to getting good grades and being a good medical student. So the USMLE Step 1, is there a magic number? I think that's a very, very common question that applicants have. Do I have to have a specific score to be able to apply to radiology? Or some questions, well, I got a X number score. Do you think it's wise for me to apply to radiology? And like everything else in life, there's not a straightforward answer. And now it's even more complicated because moving forward, the USMLE will become a pass or fail exam. So we need to see how that is going to affect the application process. But these are the facts. The AAMC USMLE Step 1 average for the United States is usually around 230, 232, 240. It is really important to open the door into the process, meaning giving you an interview, and especially in big programs like diagnostic radiology, people may receive 800, 900, even 1,000 applications, and in some ways it's virtually impossible to completely read the ERAS application of every single applicant. So we have to put some type of factor here to try to help us get a better idea of who will be more compatible with the program that you're applying with. In our case, with our program. At our institution this year, the average USMLE Step 1 for radiology applicants was 243. Most competitive residency in the U.S. will use a 235 to 240 cutoff as a starting point to offer interviews. Not everybody. I'm just talking in general terms. Does it mean that you need a 230 score to get into a residency program? No, but it does help to get an interview. There are many other things you can do to get yourself in a better position, but it does help in a way of just getting an interview. Is the USMLE Step 2 forgotten? Well, it's not, but some people don't take the Step 2 at the time of application, and that makes sense to some. If you are a student who got a really, really high Step 1 score, more likely you're not going to be very excited to take the Step 2 before application, because you're probably going to feel like, well, this only can hurt me. If I got a very high Step 1, they're going to expect me to match that score with a Step 2. So, and if I don't, that's going to look bad on me, because people think usually, well, I want to show progress. But if you have not done as good as you wanted on the step one, I think it's a good idea to study hard for the step two and do better. In our institution, we do look at the step two, but in all honesty, it's not as important as the step one right now. We're going to have to see now that the step one is going to change to pass or fail. How about the grades? Well, the grades, in the opinion of most people, are really important because step one is just one day. You took a test one day. You may have had a bad day, but the grades is a combination of 2 years, 3 years of hard work, and there's much more data to be able to evaluate. The problem with the grades is that a lot of medical schools have turned into this holistic approach and are moving away from traditional grade point average to pass or fail. This is meant to decrease competition and stress between students. It's a good idea, but it can be confusing for residency programs because sometimes it's really hard to try to make them equal across schools, like what this pass or fail honors means in compared to somebody that has normal grades, and sometimes can be a challenge. So when it becomes a real challenge, well, unfortunately, it renders the grades less important. There's always the dean's letter, but it's usually too generic, but it does include an overall ranking, even if by quartile, and I think the dean's letter is important in that they usually have some information there that is important about the things you've done in medical school. So even though you have no control about the dean's letter, I think it does help a lot in terms of application. Bottom line, at this point, it's usually less important than the USMLE Step 1, but it is important. My recommendations: get an advocate, get a mentor for orientation and guidance. I would recommend you to work hard with a faculty that ultimately gets to know you well. That is very important. Somebody that gets to know how you work, gets to know your commitment, gets to know how interested you are in the specialty that you're going into, in this case, radiology. An advocate can help you get places. I feel a recommendation by a trusted colleague means a lot. If I get a call by somebody from another institution, a colleague that I trust, and tells me, look, this medical student has worked with me and has done an outstanding job, that means a lot to me and to most people. So I think you try to get an advocate. It doesn't come for free. You have to work hard and you have to show up. But most of the people just don't. They just say, because in radiology, specifically, it's kind of hard to rotate as a medical student, but I think you should do an effort to try to get a mentor and an advocate. Scholarly activities, I would favor quality over quantity. I read a lot of ERAS applications and there's a lot of noise. A lot of people put a lot of scholarly activities that have no weight. Do as much as you can, obviously, as long as you do a good job. I would not sign up for anything you're not certain you can see through. So if you're gonna do scholarly activities, try to make sure that you do something that there is a high probability that you're going to see through to the end. In terms of research, it helps a lot, but in most residency, nobody expects you to be an NIH-granted principal investigator. Research is really important for everybody. It looks good on residency programs and on institutions, and it says a lot about the applicants, because usually research is done an extra time, and it usually requires the applicant to be industrious. But as a medical student, I think it's better to participate in more simple research that can be published, as opposed to being part of a big project that will not be published in the future. I think that in your ERAS application, it's better to put things that you have actually finished than just put a lot of things in progress. I think that's something that doesn't have much weight. I recommend to medical students to get involved in educational exhibits. They're easy to do. They're very visible. You can do with almost any mentor, even people that are not major research, don't participate in major research, are usually available to be your mentors in educational exhibits. And also gives you the opportunity to attend a national meeting and network. At least in our specialty in radiology, a lot of students present some educational exhibit at the RSNA, and at the RSNA they get to network and meet people from other institutions. There is even a residence happy hour, and usually you see a lot of program directors, and every year that I go I get to meet medical students, and it's a good way to get yourself known. That it also shows that you have a lot of interest in what we do. Rotations in your institution in a way, it most definitely helps. I think if you want to do radiology, you should rotate in radiology, obviously. But in specific, outside your institution, this is costly and it requires a lot of paperwork, and it, quite frankly, may be a headache for you. But it helps. There is such thing as courtesy interviews. If you, in our institution, if you did all this work to rotate with us, got here, spend the money, sacrifice, and getting an apartment and getting yourself to the hospital, it says a lot about how much interest you have in the institution, and we will usually give a courtesy interview. I say courtesy just because, not because we're just doing you a favor, but because it will be independent on what are your grades and such. It's because you just demonstrated so much interest that we're just going to give you an interview. Do your research before going anywhere. I think going to a brand name institution is not going to help you if you don't have the required numbers. Nobody cares you did a 1 month observership at Harvard. I'm not picking on Harvard. It's just that Harvard is a brand name and everybody recognizes the name. So if you want to do a rotation in Harvard, do it because you want to do it and get the experience. But if you're thinking about how I'm going to improve my chances into getting into a residency program, I think that nobody is going to care that you did an observership at Harvard. Nobody's going to interview and say, okay, this person spent a month at Harvard. That's really going to help them. So just keep that in mind. And ask your advocate and mentor about potential places that might be more welcoming for people, for students as yourself. And knowing somebody in that place helps to at least get you to know people. And while you're in the rotation, do your best to meet the program director or any of the associate program director. The importance of social intelligence, this is very applicable in radiology. As you know, in radiology, medical school rotations are very passive. You can't dictate any report. Seems like you can't work. Seems like you can't help the attending or the resident. You just feel like you're sitting there behind somebody. And unfortunately, probably nobody will care if you arrive at 5 in the morning to get everything ready like people would appreciate in surgery and other rotations, because at that time there's nothing for you to do. So the most important thing for you to do is be present in the reading room, but try not to be intrusive. And that is very hard and requires high levels of social intelligence. How do the faculty and residents know that you're there and that you're interested without being intrusive, without being like, okay, this student is not letting me work, not letting me get all this studies out so I can get out in time to go home. So just try to keep that in mind. I would recommend to offer your assistance when possible. I think helping in patient care by knowing the medical chart of the patient, the condition, why the study was ordered. When medical students have the initiative to call the team to ask for pertinence of why this was ordered and what are they looking in that study, those things are really helpful, and it says a lot about you and how much you really want to participate in the care of the patient. And try to do it without being asked. That would be perfect. And be industrious. I think that's should be industrious. Just try to project yourself as somebody who really can take charge of the work and is interested in what's going on in the reading room. Also know that the residents are the eyes and ears of the department. Please never forget that. If the residents strongly dislike you, your odds are very low to match in that particular program. So I will always recommend that when you're around residents, don't get into gossip or badmouth anybody. I wouldn't do it any time in your life, but that's not a good time to just join in their gossiping or complaint. Just try to stay out of it. You don't want to get in the wrong side of anybody. And in most institutions, the residents work really closely with the students, so most of the program directors ask the residents about their opinions. Not only that, most institutions have residents interview applicants or at least go to dinner or some type of social event. So residents are the eyes and ears of the department. just an image of the Virgin Islands to relax. And the eras, the application, take your time and do it right. You're marketing yourself. This is not a task that you want to do fast and irresponsibly or leave to the last minute. In eras, it's important to write hobbies. I don't know why some people don't write hobbies, and even though everybody likes to hike, it's one of the very common hobbies. I think when you're interviewing people, it's one of the things that you can talk to an applicant in a more relaxed way. Just talk about hobbies. Like if you like art, well, I like painting, well, let's talk about your painting. I think for most people, they look at that hobbies section and just to try to get an idea of what you do and things that we can talk about that are not necessarily academic. So I think in that hobby part, you should just spend some time thinking of what you do. But at the same time, do not lie and do not make stuff up. I think that you will stay out of a ranking list if somebody who's interviewing you finds that you're lying on the application. And don't put anything down on areas that you cannot talk about in detail, like ghost researcher, the fake mission trip, or the Olympic athlete. I've interviewed a lot of people through the years that they put stuff in the application, and when I ask them specifics about it, they really can't say anything about that. So it just doesn't look good on you, and just those things you try to leave out. And I think you need to put very, very honest things in your application that you can talk about it in detail because they are true. Letters of recommendation, I don't think they won't help you get an interview in most cases, but it will help you get high on the rank list. When I interview somebody, I read the recommendation letters. Again, get an advocate. This sounds repetitive, but if you have an advocate and a mentor, they are likely to write you a better recommendation letter. Who writes the letter is important, but a bad letter will kill you. So if you're just trying to get this famous radiologist or physician in your institution to get you a recommendation letter just because they're famous, but they don't even know you, just don't do that, because that will hurt you more than what it will help you. But I think that who writes the letter is important, specifically if it's somebody that is known throughout the nation and people will recognize their name. Nobody reads generic letters, so ask around. Every year we read, I think a lot of them, not the majority, but a good number of letters are just repetitive, copy and paste. So try to ask around of what faculty actually do more thoughtful letters. Shoot for somebody who's willing to write about you and what you've been doing as a rotation instead of rewriting your CV. I think that your CV is in errors, and when I read a recommendation letter, there's just a CV in a letter. Well, it doesn't help you at all. So this is one of the best letters I ever written. It's very short, but it has a lot of things. There's nothing here about the CV, but I say stuff like her social intelligence is off the chart. She gets noticed for the right reason, but you will never notice her efforts to be pertinent. I says I would recommend her for the residency program. She is without doubt in the top 5% of all the medical students I've worked with. I even say if you're lucky and she ends up in your residency program, you're welcome. So I'm not trying to say all the things that this applicant accomplished in medical school, but I'm just trying to talk about what makes her special as a person that worked with me. And I think that's really important in a recommendation letter. The personal statement should be a simple writing without typos. You're not Shakespeare, neither you're going into English literature, you're going into medicine. I've read some personal statements that are so philosophical, complex that I don't even understand what's the point of it. Try to be straightforward with clear writing. You can be creative, but try to be straightforward. And immaculate grammar, revise. Just if you read a personal statement that has a lot of typos, you should assume that this person did not put any effort on this. So typos happen to everybody, but just revise. Be honest and try to explain in simple terms the reason you're attracted to the radiology, in this case, and try to show some understanding of our specialty. Be original as possible. Just that in mind, the very common personal statement is something in the lines of the radiologist saved my mom, uncle, grandma life with the study that they read, or I've always loved technology and I feel like this goes in the technology way. And also, I love all my rotation, and radiology encompasses all of them and puts them all together. So some of the things that I commonly see in personal statement. So try to be original if possible. I've read very, very original personal statement that actually are very entertaining to read. And actually, with a good personal statement, it brings about a lot of topics to talk in an interview. So emails of interest, that you either before you get an interview or after you get an interview, you try to get the program director an email. I think that emails to the program director expressing interest in a specific program is a fair game. Many applicants send emails. But my recommendation is don't send generic emails. Have them short and specific for that program. Every year, I receive a lot of emails that I know that they just have changed the name on the top and a few things in the paragraph. It's a very generic email, and usually delete those and don't even read them. Be specific about the reasons you're interested in that institution in particular, and of course, again, try to be short. Something in one paragraph that the program director or associate program director will read and will get back to you. Don't put your CV, the es in eras, then there's no reason to write it down in an email, and no excuses. I think that, every year I receive an email, well, I just want to let you know that I didn't do that well on the step one because whatever reason, Y reason. I think that you should not write emails to program director with excuses. Interviews by the number. Institutions like UAB, I worked at University of Alabama Birmingham, and also the UT Health San Antonio receive approximately 800 to 1,000 applications every year. And here we accept 10 to 11 residents a year. Most institutions in the United States will offer 10 interviews per position. For example, if you're going to offer 10 spots, you usually interview 100 people. Most large institutions will use the following filters, the USMLE Step 1 or the combined score of the Step 1 and Step 2. And a lot of people use geographic criteria, in particular state schools. That's because it's been proven that people from your region want to stay in your region. And also the mission of public schools is to offer education to the people of the state. Now, this is not a mandate, but just in general terms, we're a residency in Texas. So usually one of our first filters is trying to get the people from Texas. That doesn't mean that we're not going to interview people from any other place, because we do, but those are just telling you about the filters that people use. There are some exceptions, of course, the international medical students, people from Puerto Rico, which is the place I'm from, which they're different, but for the most part, that geographic criteria may come into play. Criteria that is almost never used for big residency, AOA, gender, obviously, what institution did you go to medical school and all that. I mean, all those things as you apply to a more and more competitive residency program, these things become more important. But for the most part, this is nothing that's going to make you or break you. So if your USMLE is less than 220, you may get many interviews in early October, but you should wait. There's a second wave, and it's complicated. The reason is that at the beginning, if you say, well, these are the 1,000 applicants in the United States, there's the top 50%, and in terms that they have the best scores and the most research and the best USMLE. Well, every single program in the United States are going to send them interview, and everybody's going to be crazy trying to get spots. And especially applicants, they try to go to as many interviews as possible. But then comes November, December, a lot of the applicants get tired, run out of money, and they start canceling interviews. And that's why I call the second wave, because when all these people start canceling interviews, then all these empty spots become available. So there's a second wave of trying to provide more interviews to people. So if you don't get a lot of interviews at the beginning, just don't panic. There's always a second wave. Residency interviews 101. I've interviewed a lot of people in my life, and I think it's a wonderful process. But Just some recommendations: when you get an interview, book it as soon as possible. Spots are limited and the process is dynamic. It changes constantly. And like I said before, you can always cancel an interview if you cannot make it. Before the interview day, do your homework and learn something about the program. There may be some information in the internet, in the website. There may be some information in some of the boards that people write about their experiences, and have a general idea of the current topics in radiology. In the past few years, it has been artificial intelligence, for example. The day of the interview, be on time, and that goes without saying, but just be on time. Dress appropriately. I like to say, think about looking professional, but you don't want to stand out. You need to stand out because of you and what you are and what you've been doing as a medical student, not the way you're dressed or the way your hair is or the way your makeup is. Apply any of those stuff just because of you and what you've done in medical school. This is not a fashion show. This is not a model tryout, and you're looking for a residency spot, and you're not looking for a partner. So keep those things in mind. In the interviews, be authentic. The best and more natural expression of yourself is yourself. Don't try to fake yourself. I think that people like me that have interviewed a lot of people through the years, we can tell when somebody's trying to fake something out. I think that the best expression of anybody is yourself. It sounds like a cliche, but you should relax and try to be yourself. For example, if you're an introvert, don't try to act as an extrovert and suddenly start talking as you have never talked before. There is always space for silence in the interviews, and that is okay. Pretending to be somebody you're not is always a fail. You come across as a fake person, so just try to be authentic. Pay attention to what the person who's interviewing you is saying, and be interested in the process. Talking a lot is not equal to being interested, and this is a good time for you to give undivided attention. It's tiresome. Sometimes you have to interview with 6, 7, 8 people, and having to give undivided attention to so many people can be tiring, but it's something that you should do. Stay away from robotic answer. I think some applicants, they read a book about how you should answer one question or the other, and they have rehearsed it, and when they ask it, it almost comes out like if a robot is talking. So try to stay away from that. Try to be more fluent and, again, authentic. When somebody answers you, you answer like you're actually putting some thought on the answer, on those questions, and not just saying something that you just rehearse and comes out as a robotic. Try to never deviate from normalcy, even when pressed. Just try to stay, no politics, no religion, don't talk about any of those things, even when pressed. I would just try to stay in baseline and smile. That's always a good thing to do. What happens after the interviews? The admission committee will meet after every interview day to discuss as a group every candidate. Everything is valid here when you sit down and discuss with other people, which usually the program director, the associate program directors, and some other faculty, and also usually the chief residents. And the letter of recommendations, personal statement, research, anything that is in ERAS is valid here, and it will be discussed. Sounds funny, but the admission committee is all powerful and will decide on the ranking list regardless of step 1, grades, or any other objective criteria. Believe me, having a 260 step 1 and 4.0 guarantees nothing. If you are an extremely smart student, but you come out to an interview with thinking that you deserve everything and too cocky and overconfident, you will not be ranked. So having good grades does not assure you anything. You still have to earn your position. And the ranking list is ever changing as more people are interviewed. So another week passes, we interview more people, and the rank list gets changed with as much people are interviewed. So that goes to answer, should I interview earlier or later? Some people say, well, should I interview earlier because it's at the beginning and everybody's very energetic, but then they'll forget me when they're finally doing the ranking at the end of the interview season? Or should I interview later and people will remember a bit better? Most of the institution will change the ranking list as it moves along. And I don't think that really matters. I think that if you stand out for the good reasons, doesn't matter if you interview at the beginning or at the end, you're going to be okay. So thank you for listening to this, and if you have any question, you can shoot me an email. These are my, if you're interested in MSK cases, I have some accounts in social media. They're completely academic. And thank you.